What's the matter, kid? Don't you like clowns? Why? Don't we make you laugh? Aren't we fucking funny?
No! As a general rule of thumb, you guys are not funny. You're honestly mostly just creepy. Hi there, guys. Today we're going to talk about 2017's It, which premiered a couple weeks ago and which I watched over a week ago but didn't make a video about before now. So, by potential view count. So, It, one of Stephen King's most famous stories. Even if you've never watched the 90s miniseries or read the book, you've probably heard about Pennywise the Dancing Clown, an evil being residing in the small town of Derry, Maine, who literally feasts on children's fear. It's a classic story, it's been frightening people for like nearly 30 years now, and it's gotten itself a new movie. And I for one thought that movie was awesome! Let's be honest with ourselves, I brought it up briefly in my Maximum Overdrive video, but as good as the 90s miniseries is in a lot of places, as commendable as Tim Curry's performance is, as many creepy scenes I remember from it that actually kind of messed me up, seriously, I still can't crack an egg without getting a little nervous, it really wasn't that good. If you've read the book, you're going to know that it's extreme in a lot of ways. Not just in terms of gore, but in themes, in execution. It's really a wild ride. And the 90s TV series, on account of being a TV series in the 90s, just wasn't allowed to really cut loose. And there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't work, like the ending, which makes a lot more sense in the book than it does here, just comes out of nowhere and really isn't very fun to watch. And honestly, most of the adult actors really don't connect with me personally. Other than Tim Curry, of course, whose performance I still deeply love. So then there's this new movie that promises to be everything the 90s series wasn't. And oh my god, they really went all out in trying to make it as extreme as the book. The first thing to address is that I, for one, think it's a pretty great idea to literally just split the story down the middle, have one movie about them as kids and one movie about them as adults. It's been a very, very long time since I actually read the book, so some details might be muddled. But the book had sort of a flashback, flash forward structure as far as I remember, and trying to doing that in a book works, like you can easily make a callback, but doing that on film tends to get annoying, especially when the film is especially long, and this time we're actually getting two movies. We're going to get like a full 5 hours of It action eventually, and it just makes a lot more sense to focus on the first encounter and give us the second encounter later, like an actual natural sequel. So props to whoever decided that was what they were gonna do. It makes the movie a lot more focused, and it makes it very fun to watch. Of course, then there's also the setting update. Those that have read the book or watched the TV series from the 90s will know that the kids were kids in the 50s in the book, whereas in this new version, they were kids in the 80s. And you can definitely argue that that's somewhat problematic, since there's a lot of 80s nostalgia going on in cinema right now. And as much as I don't mind that, and as much as I recognize that nostalgia for an earlier decade is nothing new in theaters. Like, a lot of the stuff you remember from the 80s as super original and super fun is actually a throwback to the 50s. So this is just a thing that happens. We can't really go over that. But the thing is that other than reference pools, like what the kids wear, what they talk about, what they've seen on TV, there really is no good reason it has to be in the 50s or in the 80s. I know setting updates is something that usually upsets a lot of people because nobody can handle any change whatsoever, but I don't see it as a problem here because it's not essential to the core story of a town where children experience awful things thanks to a malevolent being. And the whole concept behind it is that it pops up every 3 decades or so anyway, so I don't really see how that would be a problem. I really don't. It works for me anyway, and as far as I'm concerned, it's very easy to get pulled into the charm that this has. I know it's a lot of 80s stuff, we've seen it a bunch of times, I'm getting a little tired of it myself every now and then, but it's still very, very charming, especially thanks to the child actors. They're just so fun to hang around with that it reminds you of being a child in almost any decade, really. And they're just wonderful. I particularly like Ben, the chubby, poetic kid with who this time gets the history nerd angle. I really liked him. He's very, very charming. I was smiling my head off every time he was on screen. Kid's adorable, what can I say? And of course, there's the main man himself, Bill Skarsgård playing Pennywise the Dancing Clown, the creature we all came to see. And oh my god, this is definitely a somewhat different take on it than Tim Curry had. Now, I love Tim Curry's performance. As far as I'm concerned, that's the main reason to watch the 90s series. He's having so much fun as Pennywise. He's really getting into the clown persona of it all, and he can be very intimidating when he wants to, and the voice is definitely one that sticks in my head. Now, Bill's Pennywise does not give a fuck. He doesn't spend time like Tim Curry's on trying to actually lure anyone in with his clown persona. His clown outfit is outdated and already super creepy, and thanks to some prosthetics mishap, he's actually drooling in a lot of scenes where he talks to the kids, and that just gives such a creepy vibe, and it's unpredictable, and you can't help but notice it, and it looks great. I love that. But the thing about it, I find him so much more predatory this time around. He's not trying to play nice. He wants to scare the crap out of these kids, and he's clearly only wearing the Pennywise form because it's just what he feels like wearing, because that's just what it thinks is fun to use to scare children with. It has nothing to do with luring anyone in anymore. It has nothing to do with creating a false sense of security. It's just creepy. And my god, he really is. This is one hell of an it. There are no rules. This it can do pretty much anything at any time, and boy do they use it. From weird contortions to all sorts of strange illusions to even adapting the deadlights from the book in a really monstrous and unusual way. I love this it. I really think he's very intimidating and very interesting to watch. Bill Skarsgård did a great job. We have 2 great Pennywises now. How is that a bad thing? Now, as I said, it has been ages since I read the book, so I have probably forgotten something. There are probably things I'm getting wrong, but I do remember a few scenes from the book that I hoped would be in this one. In particular, I remember one of the bullies being in like a junkyard and finding a fridge full of giant creepy leeches that latch to his face and literally drink his eyeballs or something like that, and I'm sick in the head. I would have loved to see that scene, but hey, what can you do? One thing I'm actually really happy with how they did differently from the book is that in the book, during their separate encounters with it before they band together to defeat it, some of the kids get scared by things they've seen in movies or in TV or stuff like that. I fairly clearly remember one of them encountering the Wolfman. I think there was also a scene with the Mummy. And I'm pretty sure Mike was chased by something that is at least heavily implied to be Rodan, of all things. And in the book, it works. You get to get into the mindset, you get to know why that scared them, you get to know where they saw them the first time. But in a movie, first of all, it would be nearly impossible thanks to copyright issues and all that junk. Second of all, I think it would very quickly come across as hokey and indulgent, like, oh look, we've watched horror movies too, haha, here's some extra nostalgia on top of the 80s nostalgia. I don't think that would have worked. So they basically just went the route of coming up with completely different scenes. And I actually really like the scenes we saw. There's one in particular that I think fits really well, especially when you remember that this is a movie about children and children's fears. There is, one of the characters is really, I forget the names of the kids right now, I'm sorry. One of the characters is really afraid of this creepy ass painting in his rabbi's office. And I, for one, love that, because that is such a child's fear of the creepy statue, of the creepy painting. Something that is just there, that the adults love, but that you can't stand. I've had that. I've been the kid who like turns figurines around because I didn't like the fact that they were staring at me, you know? So that was something I could recognize. That's something I think a lot of kids and adults can recognize. And there are just a lot of really fun new ideas with the scares here. So good job on that. Now, one thing about the many scares in this movie, for the most part, I really like them. Pennywise is very surreal, very strange, does some truly monstrous things, and you're not always ready for what he pulls on you. I was rarely, like, deeply afraid, but I definitely had, like, a feeling of nope more than once when he starts doing really strange shit. So that was very effective. Sometimes they're really darkly comedic, which I think befits Pennywise's character. But one complaint I've heard from people that I can't argue too hard against is the fact that a lot of the scares are jump scares, and that is true. And jump scares get a worse rep than I think they deserve. Like, I definitely don't think a movie should entirely rely on jump scares, but I also think jump scares are a tool that can be used effectively and that have places where they belong. And here, I think they belong. The thing about it that I think people need to remember when they start complaining about the jump scares is that it is a horror story about a creature that deliberately targets children because children are easier to frighten and taste good when frightened. And the thing is, children's fears usually aren't subtle. Children's fears veer off, they go to extremes. If you warn a child about the consequences of their actions, they're usually going to imagine an insane, over-the-top version of that consequence. And children are afraid of the thing that's gonna grab them now or hurt them now. I'm not saying children can't be afraid of something a little more visceral. I'm not saying a movie about children can't have a slower build-up or more creepy scenes or more unnerving scenes. Not at all. But I think it's important to remember that this is a movie about children. Yes, they're on the verge of puberty, but they're still children who are about to put childish fears behind them. That's why they fight against it. That's why they give him the craziest beatdown I've seen in a movie in a while. It's because it's about putting that behind you, growing up and realizing the real dangers of the world. It's about losing innocence. It's about seeing that yes, the world can and probably will hurt you, but you can fight back. So no, I don't see the problem with the movie using a lot of jump scares, although I will agree that maybe it used a few too many here and there. But the real question in my mind is, will they do this with the second movie, with the adult It movie that we're going to get in 2018? Because I would definitely like to see it get more creative now that they're grown-ups. Really play on their deep-rooted traumas this time. And do it in much creepier, much more understated ways. It should definitely still be a full-blown monster at one point or another, because this is it. It's what it's supposed to be. But yeah, I want to see them take a different approach to the scares in the second movie. But I think that the ooga booga spooky spooky thing really works for this one. In general, Pennywise's very over-the-top type of scare fits very well into something I like with movies about children that I call enhanced reality. Not augmented reality, not virtual reality, enhanced reality. And what I mean about that is, think back to movies like A Christmas Story or The Sandlot, which are about people telling stories about when they were children. Really look at that and tell me, what do these movies do? They exaggerate. They take all these things that happened and show them from a child's perspective. So Santa Claus is more in your face in A Christmas Story. The elves are meaner. The slide that they push you down is much bigger. The parade is much bigger. The dad swears a lot more and literally smoke coming out from like the boiler. In The Sandlot, all the kids are way bigger bullies. You know, all that. Because children see the world as more extreme than it is. And I see a lot of that in It as well. Like, Beverly's hair is probably a little redder. Some of the bullies are probably a bit more insane. And I'm not saying the things we see in the movie don't happen. They do, and they're horrible. But I just see this as seen through a child's eyes, which means that some of it is enhanced and packs a lot more power. And that's why none of it is very subtle. At least that's how I view it. Okay, I've rambled for long enough. Let's try and wrap this up. I love this movie. I definitely think it's a vast improvement over the 1990s TV series, and I cannot wait for the sequel. There are a lot of Stand By Me vibes in the way these kids hang out when they're just being kids, and I really appreciated that. I actually rewatched Stand By Me shortly before I watched this movie, and they do have a lot of the same themes and the same feeling about them when the kids are just hang out, so that's great. And then when the horror comes, it just balls to the wall, tries to fuck you up, and it was much appreciated. This was great in my book. There are some nitpicks about the styles of scares. I didn't particularly like the first scene where, well, slight spoiler, but Georgie goes in the basement and thinks it's spooky, and then there's nothing in the basement anyway. Little things like that. But this is a 2-hour and 20-minute movie where I can only think of 2 minutes tops that I would personally remove. I think that's a pretty big accomplishment. The setting is charming, the children are great, Pennywise is terrifying, and the story still holds up. I loved it. I really did. Did you find that some of the scares in it fell flat, or were there any that you really loved? And what are you looking forward to seeing in the second movie? Let me know in the comments, and remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you want to hear me ramble more about movies, comic books, video games, all that good stuff. I talk about a lot of things. You can also follow me on a ton of social media, and if you're feeling generous, I do have a Patreon. Or if you want something in return, I'm actually taking art commissions, so take a look in the description for links to all of that good stuff. And I will see you next time. Bye!